Ladies and gentlemen, with the start of the season at the time of this recording being 1 week away, it's only right if I start my season predictions. So this week in Ball Dominant, we're going to be predicting the Eastern Conference standings. We're going to be predicting the Western Conference standings. We're also going to be predicting the NBA champions. We're also going to be predicting the MVP. And we're going to be talking about some of the rookies that I liked in preseason, and we're going to have a guest on the show for that episode. So if you guys like consistent, high-level ball conversations, you're in the right place. Ball Dominant starts now. All right, so it wouldn't be Ball Dominant if we didn't have some today news, some recent NBA news in the NBA world. So the first thing we're going to be starting out is De'Aaron Fox will decline to sign a $165 million extension with the Kings this year. De'Aaron Fox could land a $345 million deal if he finds a spot on an All-NBA team this season. And I think that's what they are banking on. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to be banking on taking more money. I do not see a world where De'Aaron Fox will leave the Kings. He is the soul of this team. He is the homegrown player for this team. They drafted him. He has progressed. He has stayed with this team throughout some of the worst seasons in their franchise's history. He has stayed through this team throughout the playoff drought. Now you bring in DeMar DeRozan. You have Domantas Sabonis. You draft Keegan Murray. You also draft Devin Carter. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to be staying on this team. I don't think it's any cause for concern. I just want to let you guys know that is what has happened in the NBA world. I'm not going to spend too much time on this until rumors start heating up. If there are real rumors that De'Aaron Fox might leave the Kings, then we're going to be talking about this more. But as of right now, I do not see a world where De'Aaron Fox can leave the Kings. And this is a very unpredictable NBA. We could see a world where De'Aaron Fox does leave the Kings. I'm not going to rule it all the way out. I just don't think it is possible. I do not think that it is realistic for De'Aaron Fox to leave. So we are not going to be spending as much time on it. Up next, we got some recent rumors that Joel Embiid probably will never play another back-to-back in his career, which is just fine with me. I think the 76ers have built, time and time again, the 76ers have built championship-level teams around Joel Embiid, and he has just not been healthy to go on that real playoff run. And at this point for Joel Embiid, I know a championship is very pivotal for his career, but if we can see a fully healthy playoff run where he can go to an Eastern Conference Finals, maybe even go to the NBA Finals, win or lose, I just want to see him get there. I want to see him just able to sustain himself throughout that entire run. I know asking for a fully healthy playoff run for Joel Embiid may be asking for a little bit too much, but if we can see him play through the pain or be able to play through the pain to give his 76ers a chance to go to the NBA Finals, a chance to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, that's okay with me. That is okay with me. And he also had a statement at Media Day where he said that he's not banking on winning another MVP. He doesn't care about the MVP. He cares about winning basketball games. And I think this is something that is showing that he is willing to not play back-to-backs, probably taking him out of MVP contention. I don't know if he's going to play 65 games. He's probably going to play 55, maybe 60. If he can stay healthy, he's probably not going to be playing back-to-backs, which he just said. And a lot of players say this. A lot of injury-prone players say that, I'm not looking towards the awards anymore. I'm worried about winning. I'm worried about staying on the floor as much as possible. And they don't really do anything to back it up, or they end up getting injured, which may not be their fault, but that's what always ends up happening. So to see that Joel Embiid is really taking that seriously this year, and the 76ers may not get much more opportunities to be a championship contending team, I think this is a breath of fresh air to hear for Sixer fans. Because when we look at all the chances they got, you draft Ben Simmons number one. You luck into that. Ben Simmons becomes really good for you guys until he doesn't. We're looking like, okay, Ben Simmons isn't working out. It's time to panic because we've based our entire process off of Embiid and Ben Simmons. What are we going to do now? Oh, you're going to bring in James Harden, who's going to play really good for you guys. And then that does not work out. What are we going to do for James Harden? Tyrese Maxey becomes one of the 10 best point guards in the league. And now how are we going to add on that? You also bring in Paul George, who was one of the most efficient players in the NBA. So when we look at the 76ers team, in my opinion, it's not on the front office. It's never on the front office. They have applied championship level teams for Joel Embiid as much as they possibly can. You have guys like Jimmy Butler. I still think their 2019 roster was the best roster around Joel Embiid for them to win. And if Kawhi doesn't make that crazy shot, who knows? I would have given them a chance against the Milwaukee Bucks. So to see that there's probably another 2 or 3 year window for this Philadelphia 76ers team Joel Embiid's health is going to be front and center. It's going to be front and center because we want to see how far this team can get, and we don't know how many more chances they're going to have. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was my recent NBA news for today. I will be recording my Eastern Conference and Western Conference videos back to back. So right after I'm done recording this one, I'm going to record my Western Conference one. So I will save a couple of recent news for that video. Anyway, for what you guys came for, we have the Eastern Conference standings prediction. I'm ready to get into that. Let's get started. Going 14-68, I have the Brooklyn Nets. And this is a team that last season looked like they were in one of the worst spots in basketball with guys like Mikal Bridges, Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nicholas Claxton. This was a team that I think went 32-50 or 30-52. They were right outside the play-in at the 11th seed or maybe even the 12th seed. This is a team that did not have their first round picks. They gave up the third pick in the NBA draft to the Houston Rockets by not having their picks. And this was a team that you're not going to see them make a playoff run. You're not going to see them bottom out and try and get the number one pick because they did not have their pick. So we looked at the Nets to be probably the worst situation in basketball. And in one offseason, in one night, actually, you send out Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks. You get 5 first-round picks from the New York Knicks. And in the same night, you also make a trade with the Houston Rockets to get your first-round picks back in exchange for some Phoenix Suns picks because the Houston Rockets want to make a shot for Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. So we look at the Brooklyn Nets now, and we see how bad their team is. We see how their veteran players are probably going to be moved off of at the trade deadline. And we look at this and say that they're probably going to cut their wins in half this season, and this is a way better situation than they could have been in compared to last season. So when we look at this roster, there is some young guys that I think are going to get a fair shot this season to show their worth, to show what they can do on the floor, because you kind of have a clean slate. You know, you want to see who you're going to bring into the future. You want to see who you're going to move off of. Guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, probably going to be moved off of. Guys like Cam Johnson, probably going to be moved off of. Bojan Bogdanovic, probably going to be moved off of. Dennis Schroeder, he's probably going to be moved off of as well. So when you let go of these guys, you let go of these core guys, Ben Simmons is probably going to be moved as well, but he's on a 1-year deal. Maybe they just ride with him for the rest of the season. Who knows? But when you remove these veteran players, what quality of NBA players do you have? You have Jalen Wilson, who was the MVP of the Summer League, has a crazy jump shot, I think has very high potential off ball. I have not seen much from him getting downhill, have not seen much from him finishing down low or finishing around the rim. That's something I would love to see from him more. 6'6", I think he's about 210, 220 pounds. I would love to see him finish down low and finish around the rim a lot better. But as an off-ball shooter, as somebody that can just shoot the ball very well, I think Cam Johnson is going to be a very good mentor for him throughout the first half of the season if they do decide to trade him. They also have Dariq Whitehead, another great shooter, and shown some signs at Duke to be a very solid on-ball defender. You would love to see him progress as a two-way player as well. You also have Noah Clowney, who I think is very, 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 very underrated when it comes to him on the defensive side, when it comes to him being a shot blocker, when it comes to him attempting to guard on the perimeter. And there have been some moments where he has looked really good at that. Attempting to be an outside shooter, where there have been moments where he can show that maybe a year or two down the line, he could be a league average three-point shooter or maybe even higher. You know, I think his minutes next to Nicholas Claxton may be very effective. And if he can hit that outside shot very well, I think he can be very, very complimentary to Nicholas Claxton and how they play defense. I wanted to share this stat with you guys super quickly. It says Noah Clowney and Nicholas Claxton form a nasty defensive front court. By the way, this is from NBA University. So on Twitter, if you guys want to go check him out, make sure you do that. Miraculously, plus 5.4 per 100 possessions when they shared the court together in a suboptimal context. Both incredibly mobile, effectively guarding on the perimeter and protecting the rim while being mean dunkers on the other end. And one thing that I think can make this tough is we're seeing the NBA get a lot bigger. You know, we had an era in the NBA where it was a lot of small ball lineups, a lot of 5 out, and now we're starting to see some of the dominant teams in the NBA have a multiple big rotation. When we look at the Dallas Mavericks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Boston Celtics, these teams have multiple big men. The Minnesota Timberwolves, these teams have multiple big men that they could put out on the floor, and they could still be a positive when they're out there. And I think having a twin tower type of front court with Noah Clowney and Nicholas Claxton, who are so well on their feet, so versatile, especially with a guy like Noah Clowney having the agility, and Nicholas Claxton really to have the agility to guard on the perimeter, whether it's threes or fours sometimes. I just think that's very good for the future of their team. And if we talk about Cam Thomas real quick, a lot of people are really projecting the inefficient 25, 26 points per game from Cam Thomas because he's going to be the one that has the ball for the majority of the time. I think this is a contract year for Cam Thomas. So if I'm the head coach for the Brooklyn Nets, or if I'm the general manager for the Brooklyn Nets, the way you're going to earn your contract with us is if we see an improvement as a playmaker and a defender. We know you can put the ball on the floor, and a very inefficient scoring on a bad team, I don't necessarily deem it as valuable. But one thing I would deem as valuable is you getting other guys involved into the offense. You being able to not be a complete negative on the defensive side of the floor. So I think Cam Thomas was a guy that averaged about 25 or 24, 3-3 for the Brooklyn Nets. This season, I don't have to get 27 points per game from you. Give me 22, 23 with about 5-6 assists. If you can give me that, that's fine with me. I want to see him be more efficient. I want to see him catch and shoot a little bit better. I want to see him make plays when the defense attracts to him. I want to see him be more engaged defensively. And this team is going to be bad. There can be nights where you're like, okay, I'm going to try and get guys more involved. I'm going to try and be a better distributor for my team. So I have this Brooklyn Nets team going 14-68. They're going to be the worst team in the league. They're going to be the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and they're going to have a very big chance at getting the number 1 pick in the draft. Now, moving on to the second worst team in the NBA, with the second highest odds, in my opinion, to get Cooper Flag, we have the Washington Wizards. And this is a team that is not good. They just started their rebuild, actually, trading Kristaps Porzingis, trading Bradley Beal, trading Deni Avdija, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. But you have some talent on this roster. You have guys like Bub Carrington. You have guys like Bilal Coulibaly. You have guys like Alex Sarr. You have guys like Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. There's a lot of talent on this roster, or young talent on this roster, that you're probably going to spend the entire season just letting them figure out what they can do. Or as a coach to player standpoint, we're going to try and figure out how we can really progress this young talent into being something for us in the future. So when we look at some of this young talent, guys like Bub Carrington, who I think can score very well in the mid-range, who can score very well in the pick and roll, who is a decent shooter, very solid shooter. I would love to see him get his playmaking up if he's going to be a lead guard in the NBA, or he's probably just going to fall to those tier of guys who would be a point guard if their playmaking was better, but are forced to play the two. And then on top of that, you have Alex Sarr, who was probably the best player in this draft coming in. I don't think you're going to get much from him offensively. I don't think there's a lot of rookies in this draft class where you're going to be like, that guy's going to give me so much offensively coming in, because this is just not that draft class. This is a type of draft class, in my opinion, that breeds high-level starters, breeds great six men or great rotational guys. And I think Alex Sarr is going to be leaning heavy on his defense with his athleticism, his shot blocking, his length. Right now, he doesn't play the best with physical contact. He shoots a lot of threes. He puts the ball on the floor. And I just don't think he is a power forward, in my opinion. I do think he is a center. But there is also a world where Alex Sarr and Bub Carrington, that pick and roll could be very, 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 it could be very good for them and building something in the future in that aspect. Moving on to Bilal Coulibaly. I think Bilal Coulibaly showed us a lot last season. His length, his athleticism, his defensive upside. He also showed some things as a shooter. I think he shot about 35% from three last year on 3 attempts. I would think he should get a lot more opportunity to do that this season, because this Wizards team is not going to be good, and their number one priority is going to be developing these young guys. And I think Bilal Coulibaly being more of a ball handler, he still was not consistent in the pick and roll, but we did see some signs that he can be a pick and roll creator. We did see some signs that he can be a league average shooter, and with his length and athleticism, I think he's going to be one of the better defensive starting wings in the league. So that's something we can build on as well. I think Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly are the building blocks to a very good defense in Washington. And who knows, if you get Cooper Flagg, that defense is going to be even better with a small forward of Bilal, a power forward of Cooper, and a center of Alex Sarr. I think that defense can be very good. You also have Bub Carrington, who shows to be a solid scorer at college. He only played I don't know how many games he played. Actually, I don't know how many minutes he played, but I think he averaged about 15 points per game in college. He was very good in the pick and roll. The only thing is, I would love to see him get better as a playmaker, especially if he's going to be the lead guard for a team at the NBA level. Up next, we will be talking about the Chicago Bulls, and I have them. By the way, I have the Washington Wizards going 19-63. I have the Chicago Bulls going 25-57. I think this team is going to be bad. I think this team is going to be one of the worst defenses in the league. If we just look at their starting lineup with Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic, the only league average to above league average defender on that team or on that starting lineup is Patrick Williams, and he's been looking very slow in preseason. He's just looking slow on his feet, and I just think there's a real possibility this could be the worst defense in the league this season. You have Ayo Dosunmu, you have Lonzo Ball coming back, you have Josh Giddey, you have Kobe White, you have Zach LaVine. Those are 5 guards who are going to need minutes. You know, I think Lonzo Ball, if he can come back and show anything or show any sign of what he was before the injury, I think that's a win, and I think you ship him out. I think if anybody has any type of desperation for another star, whether it's the Lakers, whether it's the Clippers, whether it's the Warriors, you send Zach LaVine out. It does not matter if you're getting a second-round pick and probably a 10th man on the worst team in the league. It does not matter what you get for Zach LaVine, you ship him out. And this is not me saying Zach LaVine is a bad player, but Zach LaVine is not on the same type of trajectory as the Chicago Bulls team. The Chicago Bulls team needs to do an open rebuild where they have no all-star caliber players on their lineup. And Zach LaVine is an all-star caliber player. He's going to produce more wins than you would like for this Chicago Bulls team. That's why I don't have them going like 21-61, because Zach LaVine is going to provide you wins. I would not be surprised if this Bulls team goes 30-52. I would not be surprised if they go 31-51, but that's probably the highest I would give them, because this team defensively is still bad. You have a logjam at the guard position. Matas Buzelis, who was a top 5 prospect in the NBA draft, fell in your lap, and you can't start him. I would love to see Matas Buzelis start. And I don't think it's crazy for him to be starting by the end of the season and taking Patrick Williams' starting minutes. But when we just look at this offseason, man, you missed a lot of the mark. And it really comes down to how you played the trade deadline last season. This was a team in Chicago who still believed they could have contended for a playoff spot. They held on to guys like DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso when you could have gotten way more back than Josh Giddey, Chris Duarte, and 2 second-round picks for those players. And at the trade deadline, you really could have packaged Alex Caruso and Zach LaVine to a team, and you could have got something back for that. So I think this offseason was a really big miss. And I'm not saying Josh Giddey is just an awful player, but in OKC, he could not really show what he was capable of, because SGA, rightfully so, was the lead ball handler for that team. So I just think they really dropped the ball. Now they're stuck with Zach LaVine, who you probably aren't going to be able to trade. I mean, the Golden State Warriors weren't even willing to give up CP3 or Andrew Wiggins. And right now, the second apron in the new CBA rules are the biggest bully in the NBA. You know, if a guy's making the money of Zach LaVine and has the injury history, doesn't really produce high-level winning basketball, I don't know how you're going to be able to trade for him. He might just be on that roster for the next 3 seasons. And it's not even because he's a bad player. It's just because of the contract. You know, over the past 3 seasons, before last year, Zach LaVine was giving you 25 points per game on about 61% true shooting. This is a guy who is hyper efficient. This is a guy who can shoot the piss out the ball. This is a guy that can put the ball on the floor. He's extremely athletic. It's just when you don't play that much, when you have a contract like that, people are going to kind of coast by what you do well on the basketball floor, and they're going to start magnetizing those weaknesses. The fact that he's not that consistent on the defensive side of the floor, the fact that he has not been a consistent playmaker. Those things are going to be a lot bigger on the floor. Those things are going to be pushed even further when you have not been on the court to produce. And then there's still some young players on this team that we kind of saw blossom last season, and we're not going to see them in the same position. Ayo Dosunmu, for example, as a starter, gave you 18 points per game last year. Kobe White broke out as the lead guard for the Chicago Bulls team. So what does this Bulls team go into the offseason and do. Let's bring in more guards. Let's move Kobe White from the point guard back to the shooting guard, even though he broke out at the point guard position. Ayo Dosunmu looked like he could be a very well counterpiece to Kobe White with his defense, with his scoring in the starting lineup. Let's move him back to the bench. Let's wait to trade Zach LaVine. Let's wait to trade DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso after the trade deadline in the offseason where they're a lot less valuable. And let's move this team back into the next season and probably win around 30 games, even though we have a top 10 protected pick. Those are the things that make me look at the Chicago Bulls team and say, this rebuild is going to be dragged. This rebuild is not going to be one of those fast rebuilds, you know. I think if you want me to be completely honest, there it is. So the OKC Thunder and the Detroit Pistons started their rebuilds at the same time. And now the Detroit Pistons are still one of the worst teams in the league, while the Thunder are going to be contending for a finals. So when we look at rebuilds, there's no real timetable on rebuilds in the NBA. Some rebuilds could take 10 years. Some rebuilds could take 3. It's all about how you draft. It's all about how you manage your assets. It's all about how you manage your picks. It's all about how you manage the players and who you bring in as a head coach. And I just think the Chicago Bulls have missed on so many of these opportunities to where this team's going to be bad for the next few seasons. And if you're going to, and who knows, maybe you luck in and get the number 2 pick and you go get a guy like Ace Bailey or Cooper Flag, and you get lucky and you're able to flip this team around in 3 years. I really don't see it happening. And I don't see it happening, man. This Bulls team is going to be in a very tough position. At number 12, I have the Detroit Pistons going 25-57 at my 12th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they will be improving by 11 games. That's a lot. And one thing about the Detroit Pistons, I never really thought that their team was as bad as their record. I definitely think they had some personnel on this team to where they could have been a lot better than 14 wins. I'm not saying 33, 35, but maybe around 21, 22. That would have been a better season for them. And when we look at the changes on this Detroit Pistons team, they obviously brought in some floor spacing. I think the Detroit Pistons have not really built this team around Cade Cunningham that really fit around his play style. And when we look at the other guys in their in his draft class, guys like I think Alperen Sengun was in his draft class, Jalen Green was in his draft class, Scotty Barnes was in his draft class. We're starting to see these rookies we're starting to see these young players really take strides and really command their organizations to build around them. And the Detroit Pistons just have not done that correctly, in my opinion. Getting a guy like Ausar Thompson who can't space the floor. He's a great defender, very athletic, one of the better rebounders at his position, and that's fine. And then you go get another guy in Ron Holland who is in a vacuum the same player, a guy that can't stretch the floor, a guy who's extremely athletic, has the defensive upside, but can't space the floor. So you bring in guys like Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., and praying they can hit outside shots consistently. You still have Simone Fontecchio who can shoot the ball really well. You have Jaden Ivey who's inconsistent from 3, but you would hope that he can get that floor spacing together. And then you have Jalen Duren where he's not a good defender. Like there's this lie around the NBA community that Jalen Duren is just a good defender. No, he has the tools to be a good defender. Very athletic, very strong, very lengthy. Could be a guy that can block shots, guard in the pick and roll, guard in the post, but he just does not do that right now. And this is where I think they can improve 11 games because I think JB Bickerstaff is the defensive-minded head coach that could bring that out of these guys on defense, out of a guy like Jaden Ivey, out of a guy like Jalen Duren, out of a guy like Simone Fontecchio. And then you already have good perimeter defenders in Ausar Thompson, and then who knows what you're going to get out of Ron Holland. I think he's going to show some signs of being a solid defender as well. But this Pistons team is still ways away from being a playoff team. I think Cade Cunningham is going to make a jump this season. He's going to be in my talks for being most improved player this year. He gave you about 23 and 7.5 last year with some of the worst floor spacing in the league. I think just those small signings is what's going to make his numbers look a lot better, especially if he's playing next to guys like Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley. They're consistently knocking down their shots. So even if they do improve, I don't see it being more than 11 or 12 games. Like this is probably the highest I have them ranked at 25-57. So that's how the Pistons are going to look, in my opinion. I still think they have some of the groundwork laid, but I would really consider trying to structure this roster around Cade Cunningham, and I don't think they've done that the best. Up next, I have the Toronto Raptors going 35-47. This is a team that's going to be predicated on how big of a jump can Scottie Barnes make. I mean, last season he was giving you about 20 points per game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, about 57% true shooting. They ask him a lot on defense. They ask him to be an on-ball defender, to be an off-ball defender, to guard in the post, to guard the best player on the perimeter. I do think they ask him of a lot, but when we look at this team, I don't think they're going to be bad enough to be in contention for a top 2, top 3, maybe even top 5 pick. Don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs, and that's where it gets a little tricky, because do we know for sure if RJ Barrett's run with the Toronto Raptors was real? 22 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. I think he shot pretty efficiently as well. They have guys like Jacoby Walter and Grady Dick, who I would love to see more from. Grady Dick is a guy who never really got things going on ball, but as an off-ball player, working in the mid-range, working around the three-point line, I would love to see that from him. Emmanuel Quickley is one of the more underrated defenders in the NBA. I think he's going to take a jump. So the main question for this Toronto Raptors team, if it were me, is can Scottie Barnes be that premier young talent that you are confident in that will bring you to a championship? So truly, I think that is what the Toronto Raptors will be banking on. Can Scottie Barnes improve to be that for sure talent, or for sure young talent for this team to move forward in the future? And if he can, you start building the perfect team around him so you guys can move forward in the future. At the number 10 spot, I have the Atlanta Hawks going 40-42. And this is a team that probably has the best defensive personnel around Trae Young that he has had in his entire career. You have guys like Dyson Daniels and DeAndre Hunter, who is still not as good as he once was as a defender, but I still think he could be serviceable. I think Jalen Johnson is very versatile on the defensive end. I think Capella is still a decent shot blocker, but I think Onyeka Okongwu at his point in his career is just better. And hopefully they move off of Clint Capella. I think Zachary Reese-Shea shows signs to be a good 3-and-D player, and that's really what they drafted him for, to hit the outside shot, to be a decent defender, attack closeouts pretty well. But once again, when we look at this team, I mean, the personnel is just not good enough for me to think that they can win 44-45 games. I mean, last year they were 27th in defensive rating. I don't think that's going to get much better with Dyson Daniels and Zachary Reese-Shea and DeAndre Hunter and their defensive personnel. But I do think it can improve to maybe 20, 21, 19, around that range. It's maybe mid-tier in the NBA, but honestly, I just think Trae Young is going to make this team a respectable offense. I mean, the last few seasons, they were 12th in offensive rating. The year before that, they were 7th. They're always hovering around maybe 6 to 12 or 13 in the NBA, and that's just because Trae Young is one of the best playmakers in the league. He's a great shooter. Last year was his best defensive season. He still wasn't that good, but just to see that effort from Trae Young a little bit more is something that you can look forward to. This team, I don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs, but once again, I just do think that they are better than the teams below them, and they have the best player out of all the teams below them. When we look at the Raptors, the Pistons, the Bulls, the Wizards, and the Nets, Trae Young's going to be able to really push this team to be a top 15 offense in the NBA. As far as Zachary Reese-Shea, I just think that obviously this is probably the worst number 1 pick we've seen in a while, just prospect wise, because we've seen Anthony Bennett be very disappointing as a number 1 pick. But just prospect wise, I think Zachary Reese-Shea could be the worst number 1 pick we have seen in a while. And that's not me saying he's going to be a bad player, but when you get a guy number 1, you're expecting them to change your offense. And Zachary Reese-Shea's ceiling to me could be like a high level starter. I don't see him becoming an all-star player. Don't see him becoming a guy that's going to lead a franchise, but he can be a very respectable 3-and-D player. And that's what they drafted him for, to be the guy that can stretch the floor. You know, he was banking on his jump shot in his previous years overseas. He was making shots at a decent clip. He's a solid free throw shooter. He can attack closeouts. He can be a decent defender. He has the upside to be a decent defender, but I just think asking him to create with the ball in his hand, especially coming in, may be a little too far. We're really going to be banking on his jump shot to see if he can make that consistently. Now, as far as Jalen Johnson, I think the record of this team is really going to stand on how good he is and how good he can be as a number 2 option. Because when we saw Jalen Johnson break out last year, he was giving us a little bit of everything. You know, he's shown us a little bit that he can create with the ball in his hand. He showed us a little bit that he can lead an offense in moments when Trae Young isn't on the floor. He can be a lob threat. He's very, very athletic. He can hit from the outside. He's a versatile defender. I think he was grabbing somewhat around 8 or 9 rebounds a night last season. I can see that going up to 10. And this could be a really good player for them. And I think this is really what's going to be the main storyline around the Atlanta Hawks is how good he can be. Because if he's not as good as a second option, do you now try and find a second option, or do you now try and blow this team up even more? I think guys like Clint Capella could be gone, by the trade deadline. There's going to be a market for Clint Capella around that time, and you already have Larry Nance Jr. coming off the bench. So Clint Capella only makes sense to be moved. Ultimately, though, I have this team going 40-42. I kind of flirted with 37. I think 37 is their lowest, and I think 43 is their highest. So I had them originally at the 10th seed at 37-45, and then I moved them up to the 9th seed and gave them 43-39 just because this defense could be a lot better than they were last year. I think Trae Young is really good and can really bring up this offense. I mean, when we look at it, this team was +3 net rating with Trae and without DeJounte Murray. And there were almost +4 points per 100 possessions better with Trae Young and without DeJounte Murray. So I felt as though I was a little too low, and then I felt as though I was a little too high, and then I just gave them kind of around the middle, around 40-42. That's probably going to be my stance on them this season because we don't know how consistent DeAndre Hunter, Dyson Daniels, and Zachary Reese-Sachet are going to be. I don't know if they're ever going to be as good with Clint Capella on the floor versus Onyeka Okongwu. There's a lot of inconsistencies on this team, and I see them going 40-42. I see them. I definitely don't think they can fall out of the play-in, and since they don't have their picks, that's what kind of made me think about 43-39 as well. But I ended up sticking with 40-42, and I think they're going to be the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. If you guys wondering why I keep looking down, I think these are. I think that's for every NBA analyst. We're gonna keep stats. We're gonna take our notes. Always. I'm always going to come in my videos with notes, and I'm going to cover this up, but the thing won't even focus. Oh, there it is. Anyway. Yeah. So I always keep my notes. So if you see me looking down, if you see me reading stats, it's just what you're going to get. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully sooner or later I'll have this, I'll have audio for people, but I'm just not at the amount of subscribers or amount of views that I would be to even waste my time trying to make audio. I'm rambling. Let's move on to the next team. Up next, I have the Charlotte Hornets, and I have them going 41-41, one game better than the Atlanta Hawks. And this Charlotte Hornets team, this is something I look at and I say, can you guys' injury luck be good enough to where you guys can win this amount of games? And I know this is something that could be a tall task, winning 41 games when LaMelo Ball has played around 58 out of the last 164 games. You have a young player in Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball who seem to play together extremely well. And when LaMelo Ball is healthy, he's a fringe top 10 point guard in the NBA. I think this guy can lead some top offenses in the NBA. I think he has to have the right personnel. And I don't hate the personnel on this team. Brandon Miller is a guy that came off of averaging 17 points per game, a very solid scorer, great in transition, great with the ball in his hand, can shoot, solid shooter. And if he's not in the same class of Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama, there would be a lot more people talking about Brandon Miller. But the way that Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama played in their rookie seasons, it kind of takes the attention away from Brandon Miller. But he has still been a phenomenal player. And I could definitely see him being one of the top players in the NBA, 100% almost. And when we look at their new head coach in Charles Lee, I think this is a guy that's going to be praising defense and prioritizing decent defense for this team, because this has just not been a team that has been committed to that side of the ball. LaMelo Ball is not a good defender. I don't think Mark Williams is as great of a defender. I think he's a hell of a rebounder. I think he can get better as a defender, but I would say Nick Richards is a better rim protector than him. I think they still have Grant Williams, who can show signs defensively. I think Trey Mann is still going to be a good scoring punch off the bench. I think Josh Green has a hell of a motor when it comes to defense, and I think he could be solid for this team defensively. And this record is really predicated off of their health. You know, if LaMelo Ball can play 60, 65 games, if Mark Williams can play 60 to 65 games, and I know this is a tall task for LaMelo Ball, who's been fighting with injuries for the past few years, but I just don't see a world where if they're fully healthy and they have the injury luck that they need, they can't be a team that is flirting with the play-in or that can make the play-in. And once again, I struggled with the Hornets and the Hawks, to be completely honest, but I just don't see a team outside of these two that could make the play-in. I don't think the Pistons are going to make it. Don't think the Bulls are going to make it. Don't think the Wizards are going to make it. Don't think the Nets are going to make it. I can see a world where the Raptors can make the play-in, but I would bank on the Hornets just a little bit more than the Raptors. That's completely it, man. That's really it. I mean, if we look at this Charlotte Hornets team, it's going to predict a lot off of their health. And Tijan Saloon, I did not like that pick at all. I did not like the Tijan Saloon pick at all, especially when he's not going to play as much. He's not going to play as much. And I mean, a lot of guys in their rookie seasons out of this draft class won't get the minutes that you would think some players from last year's draft or the year before that draft would get. But at 6, when there's so many decent options still left and still available for this team that they need, they could have used a point of attack defender. They could have used a little bit more shooting. They could have used a little bit more athleticism. I just don't think Tijan Saloon is that guy. And who knows? Maybe down the line when he touches up more on his on-ball play, he becomes a solid shooter and the defensive upside really becomes something. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's okay. But as of right now, I just don't think taking Tijan Saloon at 6 was the best option in my opinion. If you guys hear the rain hitting my window outside of me talking, that's what it is. But one of the biggest things I want to talk about with this Miami Heat team, and there's a lot of things that I can be excited for. The first thing I want to talk about is Kel'el Ware and Bam Adebayo. There's my PlayStation. But Kel'el Ware, he looks like he can be the starting 5 long-term for this Miami Heat team. As we all know, Bam Adebayo was a top 3 defender in the league, but he's not the best rim protector when it comes to some of the other guys that I would have in his tier, like Anthony Davis, Rudy Gobert, Evan Mobley, Victor Wembanyama. And to see him take a little bit of less defensive responsibility and have Kel'el Ware be that main rim protector while Bam Adebayo can roam. He can play on the perimeter. He can play and help. He can play the passing lanes. That would be very good to me. You also have a lot of nice pieces with this Miami Heat team. Guys like Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero. If we look at Tyler Hero, about 21 points per game, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 40% from 3 on 8 attempts, and about 56% true shooting. That's a 20-point per game score you have in your starting lineup. You also have Terry Rozier, who gave you 19.8 points. He also gave you about 4 rebounds and 6 assists, about 36% from 3 and 55% true shooting. Not the best, but you guys have people who can give you production, people who can shoot on volume. And then you have Jimmy Butler, who's coming off of a down year, had about 21 points per game, got injured in the playoffs. Nikola Jovic is somebody I really like, his ability to stretch the floor and to put the ball on the floor and his effort on defense. I think there are a lot of really good pieces on this team. Haven't even brought up Jaime Jaquez, who I think can take a year or 2 jump. And having the best head coach in the NBA, this team is going to be good again. This Miami Heat team is going to be good. And when I mean good, I mean I can see them being a 7th seed. I could see them being an 8th seed. I don't really see a world where they can be much higher than that, because this offense, in my opinion, is not going to be good. This is a team that has probably a playmaker by committee type of thing. Bam Adebayo can be a solid playmaker. So can Terry Rozier. So can Jimmy Butler. So can Nikola Jovic. But they do not have that one guy who is going to really set an offense. And then their defense is still going to be solid. I mean, in the past 2 years, I think they were 21st and 27th in offensive rating. I don't know if that's completely valid. I would have to check it again. But this team is still going to be really good. They're still extremely well coached. Their playoff defensive schemes are really good. And nobody's going to want to see this Miami Heat team in the first round. This is not something that you're just going to be awarded having the first seed in the playoffs. And for a spoiler alert, I have the Orlando Magic at 7. So whoever finishes 1 and 2, they're going to have a tough matchup in the first round. This is not going to be something where, oh yeah, we can just steamroll past the Magic and the Miami Heat. These are going to be tough matchups. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Miami Heat play in the regular season. I think Bam Adebayo taking more threes, I don't think he's going to be very efficient, but him just taking more threes could be dangerous, especially if Kel'el Ware finds his way into the starting 5. At number 7, I have the Orlando Magic, and there are people, by the way, I have the Miami Heat at 44 and 38. I have the Orlando Magic at 46 and 36, and I don't know, man. This is something that a lot of people are a lot higher on the Orlando Magic than I am. I still think they're going to improve as a team. I think Paolo Banchero is going to make a step in the right direction. I think Franz Wagner is going to make a step in the right direction. But with East that is way more competitive than it was last year, way more competitive than it was the year before, I think the 76ers are going to have a relatively healthier season with Joel Embiid playing more games than he did last year. I don't know, man. I think this team is going to be a top 5 defensive team with Franz Wagner, who's a very good defender, Paolo Banchero, who's a solid defender, KCP and Jalen Suggs probably being the second or third best backcourt defensively in the league. I think number 1 is still Derek White and Drew Holiday. And the thing that really concerns me is the offense. Like, we know this defense is going to come out and compete every night. We know this defense is going to be able to match up very well against some of the teams at the higher tier of the Eastern Conference, like the Celtics, like the Knicks, like the Bucks, like the 76ers. It's just the offense with the floor spacing. I don't think bringing in one consistent shooter in KCP is going to change that. And we saw Franz Wagner be very inconsistent from the 3 ball. Jalen Suggs be very inconsistent from the 3. Paolo Banchero be very inconsistent from 3. Jonathan Isaac isn't the best 3-point shooter. And just bringing in KCP is not going to change that. And from 1 to 8, where I have in my standings, there's not a world where, I wouldn't be upset if you said the Orlando Magic are probably going to have the worst offense out of seed 1 to seed 8. And their half-court offense is not going to be good, in my opinion. I still think this floor spacing around Paolo is not the best. We're going to have to see if Franz Wagner is willing to take a jump with his outside shooting. Same with Jalen Suggs. Same with Wendell Carter Jr. Same with Jonathan Isaac. It's just this defense is going to be the main reason why they get so much wins. And if they get into a world where there are teams they go up against who are just making shots consistently, there's a night where the Bucks are having a great night from 3, or the Cavs are having a great night from 3, or the 76ers are having a great night from 3. I just don't know if their offense is going to be able to keep up with that, just because of the floor spacing and how ugly their half-court offense can really look. We saw in the playoffs last year, if they're not hitting the outside shot, this offense can be very, very, very ugly. And I don't know, man. I just don't think that can make it to a 5 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. I think they're going to get better. Once again, I think Paolo is going to make a leap in the right direction. I think Franz can be a league average 3-point shooter. But when we look at this team, and I think about them as a 7th seed, or a team that's probably at the top of the play-in, and that's just what it is. I think they're going to get better. Their record isn't really going to show that. Their seed in the Eastern Conference isn't really going to show that. But I just don't think they are there as of yet to be a team that is a for sure lock to win a first-round series, or for sure, and seriously not a lock to go to the Eastern Conference Finals or make it a competitive series in the second round. At number 6, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers going 47 and 35. This is a team that I just feel like you could have gotten better this offseason. I think there is a world where Evan Mobley at the 5 really works for you. I think there's a world where Donovan Mitchell being your lead guard works as well. And sometimes, I think I heard somebody say this, their front court is too big and their back court is too small. You know, I think Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, I don't think they necessarily fit together offensively because of Evan Mobley's outside jumper. And instead of every single year banking on that outside jumper to improve, you should just move him to the 5, where I think he played a lot better against Boston when Jared Allen was out. Evan Mobley was a great connective passer. He was great finishing down low. He was a great rebounder. Once again, he had played tremendous minutes on defense against Jason Tatum and Paolo Banchero, to the point where you can trust him at the 5 position. You can get somebody who is more versatile defensively next to him and can hit an outside shot. Like, there's a world where Donovan Mitchell can be the point guard, Evan Mobley can be the center, and you just get three and D guys around that, and you can actually win some games, because I think Donovan Mitchell is capable of being the number one on a team that can make a conference finals, or a team that even maybe can make an NBA finals if you have the right pieces around him, because he scores at the level of volume. He's not a terrible defender to where he can be a lead guard on a top 10 defense in the NBA. He can play make. There was a stretch where he was not, or there was a stretch where he was the lead guard, just him and Jared Allen, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley were out, where Donovan Mitchell gave you about 28 and 9. And that was the best brand of basketball they have played throughout that entire season. So I think that Cleveland Cavaliers team is just not constructed the way I would like it for me. That's why I have them at 6. And I think they should move forward with putting Evan Mobley at the 5. Now, how realistic is this? Not much at all, because they just re-signed Jared Allen. So I don't think that's going to be in effect anytime soon. And they're just running it back with the same core that I don't think necessarily works. You can let go of a guy like Darius Garland and get something pretty hefty in return for him. Same can go with Jared Allen. So I don't know, man. 47 and 35 is where I have them. They're still going to be very competitive. I think they're going to be a tough matchup in the playoffs, but the sixth in the Eastern Conference is about as high as I can give them. I think this is going to surprise some people. At number 5, I have the Milwaukee Bucks going 49 and 33. This is not me saying that the Milwaukee Bucks are a bad team. I just think this core, it's getting old. They're not athletic. Damian Lillard is one of the worst defenders and one of the worst starting defenders in the league. And they just don't have the proper protection around him. And with how the East is, especially with the teams that are above them, they're going to be able to match up on it. They're going to be able to get Brook Lopez out in space. They're going to be able to get Damian Lillard on an island. They're going to be able to get Damian Lillard in pick and roll. And Giannis is going to have to really make up for those defensive deficiencies. Chris Middleton isn't a good defender anymore. Damian Lillard is not a good defender anymore. Brook Lopez is nowhere near what he once was. They're a very slow team. I just think they're going to be relying on Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo way more than they would like to. Now, they do have some solid defenders on this team that can help Damian Lillard in some cases. DeLon Wright can be solid next to Damian Lillard. Gary Trent can be solid next to Damian Lillard. Taurean Prince can have moments next to Damian Lillard, but I don't think he's a real defensive stopper. And with Doc Rivers, this team is under 500. I mean, this team is third worst in pick and roll defense. This team is third worst in isolation defense, and they had the 19th defensive rating last year. Now, do I think that defensive rating can go up? There's a world if Gary Trent and DeLon Wright can really hide Damian Lillard's deficiencies, but I don't think they're at the level of defense that can really do that. And it really concerns me with this team. And the reason I'm not 100% sure about this, but I would lean them being the 5th seed more than I would lean them being the 3rd seed, is because they have potentially 2 top 20 players in the NBA with Dame and Giannis. But this team around them is just really slow. You're not going to get the best out of them. Bobby Portis isn't a guy that can just come in and anchor their defense. Brook Lopez is not that guy anymore. Maybe a few years ago, you look at Brook Lopez as a guy that can defend the rim really well, very good in drop coverage, and is a good floor spacer for them. A few years ago, that was perfect. Now it's just not that anymore. How many games are we going to get from Chris Middleton? That is a very big question mark I have for them. And it just really makes me think they can go 49 and 33. And this team is beatable. You know, I can see them losing in the first round. You know, I can see them going up against the Pacers and losing in the first round, fully healthy. I can see it. So I don't know, man. This Bucks team, I just don't think they're in championship contention anymore. And it's not because of their top end talent. It's because of the talent around it and the coaching. And I think they probably have another 2 years for this window. And then they're going to have to really consider what they're going to do with guys like Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, even Damian Lillard, because he's 34 now. I think there's a world where they can have a trade deadline miracle. The last 2 seasons we've seen Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks have a trade deadline miracle, where at the trade deadline, they're flirting with the play-in in the Western Conference. And then post-trade deadline or post-All-Star break, they're one of the best defenses in the league. They're seriously the hottest team in the NBA. And they end up going to the NBA Finals. The Los Angeles Lakers the year before weren't even in the play-in in the Western Conference, and they have a trade deadline miracle where they bring in Jared Vanderbilt, D'Angelo Russell, Roy Hachimura, and they end up going to the Western Conference Finals as a 7th seed, and I think this team could really have one of those trade deadline miracles where you send out Chris Middleton to whatever team's willing to get him, and you get a couple, like maybe 2 rotational guys who can come in and just bring some athleticism, or you move on from Brook Lopez. Maybe you send him to the Brooklyn Nets and you go get Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith. I'm really eyeing Dorian Finney-Smith out of all of them. And then maybe you just move one more guy and go get a Rob Will so he can be next to Giannis and be a solid defensive stopper. This was a guy in 2022 who had a case for Defensive Player of the Year, so who knows, man? Who knows? But right now I have the Milwaukee Bucks at 49-33, and maybe you guys are going to be even more mad at who I have at number 4, and that's the Indiana Pacers. And a lot of people are saying, like, this Pacers defense is so bad. It's so bad. I don't think they're as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I mean, if we look at, as a matter of fact, let me flip my page to the stats for the Pacers. If we look at this Pacers team, they're obviously going to be a top 5 offense in the league. With their pace, with their 3-point shooting, the way that Tyrese Halliburton is not a ball stopper. He can play off ball. He doesn't have to stop the offense when the ball is in his hand. This is going to be a top 5 offense. And this is Tyrese Halliburton's stats from October to December. 25 points per game, 13 assists, 50, 41, 85 shooting splits on 63% true shooting. Now, this is not something that I will say is the standard for Tyrese Halliburton. I think this year he can really give us 22 and 12 on still the same efficiency. I don't think he will fall to how he did post-injury. I think him fully healthy now and also having a full season with Pascal Siakam is going to be very good for this offense. And they had the best offense in the playoffs. And last year, after getting Pascal Siakam, they were a lot better defensively. I still wouldn't say they're a top-tier defensive team, but they were about middle of the pack in defensive rating, 18th in defensive rating post-trade deadline or post-All-Star break. They had the second least opponent points off turnovers. They allowed the lowest, or they allowed a lower field goal percentage in the restricted area than the Celtics, Magic, Cavs, and Rockets. These are some of the best defensive teams in the league, and the Pacers did a better job at protecting the restricted area. And I think that is predicated a lot to how fast they play. This is a team in Indiana who can get up such efficient shots so fast and so early into the shot clock, where the teams they could be playing may be having to play catch up. And sometimes that may mean getting more threes up, or just coming down the court and getting the first open shot you get instead of getting the most efficient shot in the basketball. And I think their offense takes away probably the easiest shot in basketball. So I think this Pacers team is going to be a lot better. I have them at 51-31. Yes, I have them winning 50 games this year. And I really think if they play the Bucks again, they can beat them. They can beat them. So that is it. That is that for the Pacers being the 4th seed. At number 3, I have the Philadelphia 76ers at 52-30. This is a team that I just think is really good. You bring in Paul George, you sign him over free agency, you bring back Tyrese Maxey, you still have Joel Embiid, who we talked about earlier will not be playing any back-to-backs anymore. And now the main thing with the 76ers, the biggest question in this season is going to be, can they be healthy? And Joel Embiid is coming off of a season where he played less than half the season. And the Philadelphia 76ers fell all the way to the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference without him. But now you bring in Paul George, who just came off of playing 74 games. He averaged about 23 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 45% from the mid-range, 54% from the left corner, 35% from the right corner, 41% from above the break, 46% on all jump shots, and 40% on pull-ups. This guy is extremely efficient. He can hit the outside shot. He can also create in isolation. I think leaving Los Angeles and coming to Philadelphia, this was probably the best fit for him if he was going to leave. Playing next to a guy in Joel Embiid who's going to attract so much attention on the offensive side. Same with Tyrese Maxey and how they're able to move around the floor. And Embiid and Maxey's two-man game now becomes even more dangerous, especially if Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin can hit their shots efficiently. This team is going to be really good. And I think they reshaped their team pretty well. I really like Jared McCain as a rookie. I think he's probably going to take Eric Gordon's minutes pretty fast this season. I also think Andre Drummond off the bench, who they can have a positive big man on the floor when Joel Embiid's not there, that's going to be really good. I think this all equates to them winning about 52 games, man. I think the 76ers team can be really good. And if Joel Embiid and Paul George are healthy, I think they can be seriously good. All right, I'm going to keep this kind of quick because we've talked about the New York Knicks so much this offseason that I'm going to breeze right past them. The New York Knicks are going to be the number 2 seed, and I have them going 55-27. With the addition of Karl Anthony Towns, this offense just becomes a lot better. And Julius Randle he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. Julius Randle is an all-star caliber player, but I don't think his fit with this team would have been better than Karl Anthony Towns, even at the 5 or at the 4. I think Karl Anthony Towns offensively provides some spot-up shooting, a dominant rebounder, solid rebounder, very good down low, and he's going to open up this offense so much more to where Jalen Brunson is going to have a lot more space to operate, whether it's in the mid-range, whether it's turnaround fadeaways, whether it's getting to the basket, whether it's getting downhill and doing a floater, or whether it's just getting to the free throw line, if I already said that. And then you have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Josh Hart around those guys who are really good defenders, really good off-ball players. Mikal Bridges, who got better with his on-ball play with Brooklyn, that's going to add another level of scoring that the New York Knicks needed, so Jalen Brunson does not have to backpack as much as he did last season. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are probably the best defensive wing pairing in the league. So this New York Knicks team is going to be pretty good. And if you were to ask me, I would trade Mitchell Robinson. I would trade Mitchell Robinson. There's a lot of teams that need centers in the NBA. Go trade Mitchell Robinson and go get some quality level rotation guys. So off the bench, you can have Deuce McBride, Tyler Kolek, and a couple of more players off the bench to really shore up this depth for this team. But I think you have so many good perimeter defenders that can help around the rim. I think OG Anunoby can be good around the rim. I think Josh Hart is really good around the rim. I think Mikal Bridges does a really good job guarding guards in the NBA. So I think having Karl Anthony Towns as someone who is not as consistent on the defensive side of the floor, I think you make up for that pretty well on the wing, and how versatile those guys are on the wing, to where if they get to the rim, it's going to be a lot harder to finish around there with guys like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart around the wing, where Karl Anthony Towns' deficiencies on defense isn't a world killer. And the last team standing, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, who I have going 61-21, is the Boston Celtics. I mean, this team is head and shoulders still, in my opinion, the best team in the NBA. I still think they have the best starting 5 in the NBA. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown complement each other so well. Jrue Holiday and Derek White, best defensive backcourt in the NBA, and they also give you some above average offensive traits. Jrue Holiday and Derek White are both guys who can finish around the rim very well. Both of these guys are great shooters. Both of these guys can play off ball. Both of these guys can guard multiple positions. Both of these guys are some of the best rim protectors at the guard position. This team is really good. This team is really good. And then you add in guys like Lonnie Walker, who's going to be your 8th man on this team for a minimum that you guys brought him in on. I think that's very good. Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard are still going to be great off the bench. Al Horford, once he starts coming off the bench, is going to be really good for them. They're going to get KP back about halfway through the season. Even without KP, I still think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think Jason Tatum is going to have a bounce back year and then some. Normally we see with NBA teams after they win a championship that they kind of are more lackadaisical. They're not as aggressive as they once were. I think after this offseason, Boston is more hungry than they were before they won the championship. With the things that happened with Team USA, with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's performances in the playoffs, I think they're going to hit the ground running, and I don't think they're going to get much worse at all. So I have the Boston Celtics with the best record in the Eastern Conference, and spoiler alert, the best record in the NBA once again. And spoiler alert again, I also have Joe Mazzulla as my coach of the year. So, ladies and gentlemen, that has been, I think, the 8th or 9th episode of Ball Dominant. The episode will be right here in this corner. So, I'm really excited for the NBA season, and these are my standings predictions. Standing predictions are not always the best because there's always going to be a team that breaks out and plays way better than a lot of people expect. And if I had to bank on it being any team, I think it would be. I think part of me wants to say the Hawks, just because I think Trae Young can really lead a high level offense, and that's not even me saying that the Hawks are going to be way better. But I don't know, man. It's really hard to predict for the East. I think the West is a lot easier because the Rockets are so young and they might just break out and be the 5th seed. Who knows? But yeah, man, I appreciate everybody watching. I'm going to stay consistent with Ball Dominant. We're going to have so many episodes dropping this week just because the NBA season starts Tuesday and I have to get my full predictions out. By the way, Ryan Hammer will be guest starring on an episode of Ball Dominant. So if you guys follow Ryan Hammer on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, if you guys want to see that episode, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. He will be on this channel this week. I'm very excited for that. And if you guys like this type of content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.